Welcome to HR Voices, a podcast for independent HR and people professionals and the businesses they support. HR Voices is brought to you by the expert team at HR Independence Limited. We hope you enjoy. Hi everybody, and welcome to this next edition of HR Voices. Today we are continuing talking to different consultants and business owners about their HR and people professional journey. And we're joined by Katy Walton, who is an L&D specialist. And I'll get Katy to introduce herself. So she is going to tell you about her and her background, and then we're going to have a chat with her about her questions. So Katy, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Well, I tell you what, if you cut me open, you'll see L&D running through and through. So I spent 25 years working in-house in a range of different corporates in their learning and development function. And that's everything from training to facilitating to coaching, performance consultancy, partnering. So I think that there's a lot of variety in L&D. And 2020, so 3 years ago now, I set up my own development and coaching business, Make Real Progress.
Wow, 2020, that's pandemic time.
It is, absolutely. I can't tell you how many conversations I had with people when I said, right, this is what I'm planning to do. So it was in lockdown 1. And everybody looked at me like I was staring mad and said, you're doing what right now in the middle of a global pandemic? But you know what? Sometimes in the middle of adversity, whether it's a pandemic or whether there's problems with the economy, sometimes it just gives you the biggest opportunity to get started.
I think absolutely there's a bit of synergy there with HRI because we actually launched in 2020 as well.
Right.
We're hopeful that it wasn't going to be sort of a pandemic with a knock-on impact 3 or so years on. But yes, so I totally get what you're saying and where you're coming from. Yeah, so middle of pandemic, what really drove you to start the Make Real Progress, your consultancy?
I think there were a few factors, actually. I'd wanted to set up my own business for a few years because I was curious about what it was like. And I think, like with many people during the pandemic, there was plenty of time to just stop a little bit and reflect and think, what do I really want to get from life? And I fast-tracked into the future and I thought, do I really want to be working for an organisation? Well, no, I want some more autonomy about how I work because I really liked working from home and I hadn't had the opportunity to do that before. But it wasn't just about how I worked, it was also about what I focused on. Because what I've noticed when I progressed in my career, the more senior I was getting, the more I was coming away from what I really love and what I'm really passionate about, which is helping people to make progress in their life and in their career. And I thought, actually, in the last position that I was in internally, I was spending so much time either managing and leading a team or setting out the strategy or focusing on budget planning. And I wasn't training and I wasn't developing people, and I just wanted to get back to it. So it felt like the perfect opportunity, actually.
Great. Thank you for that. That really sounds exciting. And I think a lot of consultants feel that way, where you get to the level where you think, this is what I want to be doing. That's the impact I want to be making. But then you find that in an employed role or in an in-house role, you don't always have that bandwidth or the capacity or even sometimes the leeway to do things exactly the way you want to do it. And so you so to become a consultant. But also we hear very commonly that, okay, I set off and I've got to focus on this is what I want to do. But sometimes the reality becomes very different in that, I ended up doing what my customers wanted me to do. And so I get to a certain point of stability when I start doing the things that I really want to do. So did you find that at all?
Oh, yeah, Mary, absolutely. You got it spot on. So I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do because I was drawing on such a huge range of experience. There were so many different things that I could offer. So actually, I went with the flow. I gave myself permission for the first 12 months just to see, what do I enjoy doing? What is it that customers are asking for? What do they really want and need? And actually, because it was during the pandemic, I found that most people, first of all, wanted stuff around how do you lead people virtually? How do you lead hybrid workplaces? And everything was delivered virtually. So I had a huge advantage actually on L&D companies that had set up previously, because most of them were set up to deliver everything face to face. And because I'd spent the first few months of the pandemic delivering everything virtually, so my role had shifted because we need to get all hands on deck to deliver, I was really comfortable with delivering things virtually. So I was really quickly able to pull material together, pull content together, and deliver what my customers needed. But I think you're absolutely right, because I didn't set up to run programs on helping people to lead virtually. And it wasn't where my passion really lay. So it took me 12 months of experimenting before I thought, right, okay, what is it that I really want to offer and how can I support people? And what I found really interesting actually was the things that emerged that I didn't think that I'd focus on, that I ended up helping people with. And there were quite a few things that just really quite surprised me, actually.
How did the reality sort of verse the dream in terms of running a business? Because we all have this ideal of setting up our own and running our own business, and we're going to be really flexible and able to do what we want and have loads of time, and we're going to do all these lovely things. Actually, the reality, there's still a very big list of stuff that you have to do to run a business.
Yeah. And do you know what? Just when you were saying about that, Charlotte, it reminded me of how I felt before I went on maternity leave for the first time. And I remember saying to my mum really excitedly, I'm going to learn how to make curtains. I'm going to learn how to do gardening. And she kind of laughed a little bit. And then the reality was very different. And I think it's very similar to setting up a business. You have all of these ideas about how your life might be. What I hadn't factored in was the steep learning curve for everything that comes with running a business, from managing your finances. So I manage our household finances. So I thought, how hard can it be? But it's about learning new accounting software, starting to think about planning and forecasting. And I was used to doing that in my in-house role, but it was a different kettle of fish when there were so many unknowns with my new business. Then there's everything about marketing, advertising, thinking about your branding, how you want to be seen. There were so many things, and tech as well, because I was used to having an IT support in-house. And then all of a sudden I was on my own. So if I had a bad day when my laptop crashed, I'm like, where am I going to go for support with that? So there were so many different things. I mean, luckily, I'm very curious and I love learning. So I saw it as a challenge. But there were times that it just felt really rocky. And I think that's where having a good support network, people that you can call on. And I'm really thankful to people who were either HR consultants or people professionals who'd already set up on their own. They were so generous when I started, helping me find my feet and find my way with some of these things.
I think
that's really good to hear.
Really important, that point you made there, because a lot of the time, I think when you start on the journey, you start thinking about other HR people, professionals as competitors, but the reality is people are extremely helpful and actually eager to help and to support. The amount of collaboration is huge compared to competition, because there's actually enough out there for all of us to work together and to support each other, rather than to see each other as competitors all the time.
I totally 100% agree with you, because there's a few different things that come into play here. So whether you have a scarcity mindset or an abundant mindset, and if you have more of a scarcity mindset and you think, I need to keep everything for myself, it closes you off to so many different opportunities. And some of I was going to say teammates, and I don't mean in the sense that we work together in a team, but people who I consider being part of my team are, competitors on paper. So they offer very similar products, very similar things. And I found them all to be so, so, so helpful and generous. But it opens up the doors to things that you don't know is possible, because perhaps one of these people that you're collaborating with, perhaps they've got a client that they can't take on at the moment, and they know you, so they recommend you. or perhaps you've got similar products but not quite the same. So you could either support each other by running something for one of their clients, or you could collaborate and co-create something together. There is so much opportunity out there. So yeah, totally agree. Collaboration over competition all the time.
Absolutely. And I will ask, it's obvious, but I'll ask anyway, how did you go about finding these team members, collaborators, or other consultants who would help you, effectively what someone will call your tribe? How did you go about finding your tribe of people to support you along the way?
Oh, there's a couple of different things that I did. So just before lockdown, I was running an in-person HR and L&D community. So there were quite a few people that I'd met through there, which was great because we then started deepening our relationship by catching up for Zoom calls and having virtual coffees and everything. And then the rest of them, I think it was from different communities. So I run a community online called The Progress Place, which is a Facebook group. Loads of people I met through there. Then, of course, there's your Facebook community. There's other communities that I've joined as well. And it usually happens where somebody might post something and I think, oh, actually, that's interesting. And we spark up a conversation and then that moves to a virtual coffee. Or it could be following somebody on LinkedIn and seeing they're doing something interesting and engaging or useful, or something where there's a bit of synergy. And so then connecting up there. So there was a range of different methods and approaches, and I don't even want to call it networking because it wasn't, to my mind, sometimes, even though I've just talked about having an in-person networking group, it's more of a catch up, support each other and everything else. When I hear the word networking, I sometimes think about pushy people handing over business cards and doing a sales pitch to you. And I don't mean that. It's all about connecting and being interested and curious about other people. And then I found that the relationships have developed from there.
I mean, it's just so important, isn't it? I mean, we can't, in our small businesses, we can't do everything all the time and we can't learn everything and deliver everything. So it really is important to have that ability to collaborate with others. And to do that, you need to build those relationships because you need to understand whether you can put them in front of your clients, whether you would want to work with them, whether you want to pass work their way, whether you want to invite them into your brand, because you say brand's really important. So it is more of a get to know you and a sort of a coffee and catch up and work out how different people tick and what their passions are as well, I suppose, and their values.
Absolutely. And I found connections with people who are very similar to me and also very different to me. And I think both work. What I found is that I get energy from people who think in a similar way or do similar things because, ideas start flowing. There was one person who I met, I think it was through an online webinar, actually. And we were in a breakout room together. And I really liked how he was thinking and some of his ideas. We connected. We had a few online Zoom calls. And then we met up in person probably about a year ago. And we just spent the whole day together because both of us were delivering exactly the same kind of content. And we said, well, why don't we pool our resources? Why don't we think about activities that we'd use, energizers, icebreakers, warm-ups, different ways to interpret the material so that we can both benefit. And I just loved that day. So we had so many sparks of ideas that both of us could then integrate into our businesses. And equally, I love working with people who think very differently, so more structured, more process driven, because I learn different techniques that I can integrate. And I think there's room for collaboration with so many different people for so many different reasons.
That is amazing. And you're spot on there. I mean, what you described on with the person you met online and turning into an in-person meeting where you bounced off ideas and you effectively strengthened the structure of your content and how you deliver it. It's something that you can't almost put a price on, because you've invariably got to a point where there's a mutual benefit between the two of you, and you can almost co-deliver that product to somebody if you got a bigger project or something, and that would have happened by sort of accident rather than by design. So yeah, it's really amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. There are so many benefits. Absolutely. So I'd really encourage anybody who's listening or watching to think about how they can make those connections and build those relationships, because it's probably the single biggest factor that's helped me.
Okay, and so can I ask a question about how you keep yourself sort of motivated? Because when you work, I mean, you said you really enjoy working at home, but you know, I suppose one of the reasons why HRI was set up was to try and provide a lot of support through the pandemic, because suddenly we became a very isolated sector, but providing some very sort of heavy duty sort of advice to small businesses who were going through some really difficult stuff. So it's good to provide that support, but it can be difficult to stay motivated when you're at home all the time and you do work on your own. How do you get over that? How do you keep yourself motivated?
Probably a range of different things. I think one of them is to be really organized and focused. So I do time blocking in my diary. So I give myself some time to do focused time, making sure that I've got gaps so I can do some thinking, which I know sounds crazy, but I don't know if you both have experienced this, but I've experienced times when I've been so busy delivering the work that I haven't given myself enough time to think. And I find that when I've got that thinking time, that's when the creativity starts going, and that motivates and energizes me. I make sure I spend time on my own learning and development all of the time. So there's always a week when I'm learning something new because it energizes me. So I think it's really understanding what is it that energizes you? What is it that motivates you? And for me, it's a combination of, you know, having that thinking time, that creativity, learning, and also making sure I've got the time for the connections with people as well. Yeah, so it's a real balance. And I've also found, as much as I love working at home, if I go too long a period, so say if it's a couple of weeks and I've not met anybody in person, I notice my energy dips. So I also try and get that balance and make sure that I am doing some in-person meetings or activities. And quite a lot of my work at the moment is in-person delivery. So I get a lot of energy from facilitating people face-to-face, but then I get to decompress coming back to the office.
Must be great. Sorry, I was going to say, it must be great getting back to in-person.
Oh, yeah, loved it. The thing is, I do love virtual training because I passionately believe it doesn't have to be a dry and dull webinar. You can create interactivity, engagement, connection with people if you learn how to do it well. However, there is just something magical about being in person with people and just feeling the energy of the people in the room. And whether that's a smaller group of sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 people, all the way up. So I also facilitate large scale events, so 90, 100 plus people at one time. And I get different kinds of energy from each of those different group sizes.
That's great. And I think you're spot on there. There is something. And the way I see it, virtual facilitation, etc., sometimes gives you a wider reach than you would if it's in person. So, for example, you could deliver your program to somebody in, I don't know, Dubai or somewhere, whilst in person, yes, you can do that, but it takes a lot more effort and a lot more facilitation, logistics, etc., to be able to do that in person. So that's really a place for the blend. And there is the kind of doing stuff in your own time compared to sort of in person, but absolutely sort of loads of people, I think, during the pandemic, by the end of it, are kind of yearning for some sort of in-person interaction. And that is a challenge for employers in general, which is finding the balance between bringing people together for a purpose and just asking people to ditch everything and come to the office for the sake of it. So I think it's something that businesses are still working through. Then I want to ask you is, with your L&D background and experience, everything, what key advice would you give to somebody who is listening or watching and thinking, oh, this sounds really attractive and I want to go out on my own? What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, I would say do some research, speak to people, look online, get some information so that you go in with your eyes wide open and you can start to make some plans, because a lot of people, when they're working in-house or when they're employed, they've got a golden opportunity, I think, to really do some groundwork up front. And yes, to make the connections, which we've already talked about, but also not to rush into things, because one of the biggest learning points I had, and I actually had a few people say to me, don't set up a website until you're sure about what it is that you want to put on there and what you want to offer out. So what do you think I did? I ignored that totally, set up a website. I had some really great copy and images. I was really proud of it. And actually what I ended up delivering was really very different. So it was only about 6 months in when I had to completely redesign it. So I think it's about starting off small, testing the water, speaking, getting perhaps one client, if you're able to do that on your in-house contract. Just test and learn.
Good advice. Okay.
The other thing that I like asking is the financials aspects of it, because going from in-house to becoming a consultant, you go from having almost a safety net of salaries of some sort every month to probably not knowing where your next contract or your client or whatever will come from. So again, from the finance aspect of it, you've mentioned the challenges of learning about the systems and finance in a different way. But from personal financial management point of view, what advice would you give to somebody who thinks, I really want to do this, but not really thought about the financial impact or implications of it? Or what do they need to consider?
Well, I think, first of all, just expect that, especially in your first year, there is going to be that feast and famine approach. And I don't know many people who don't experience it. And what I mean by the feast and famine is sometimes you'll have all, like buses, you'll have all of your clients at once and you'll have lots of income. And then all of a sudden you might have 2 or 3 months where you just don't. So I think it's just being clear. What's your bottom line? What do you really need to bring in to be safe and feel secure? And then also thinking about having a buffer, if possible, of just say 3 months salary that can just tide you over so that your first few months aren't panicked. Now, I know that not everybody has the opportunity to do that. People may have circumstances which means that they have to leave immediately. But if you do have chance, and if you're thinking about it, just plan ahead, think, can I create a buffer of finances so that I don't then reach out blindly and throw myself in without giving it some real good thought and consideration. And the second thing, Mary, your point of that security and stability, I really worked on my mindset, because I was nervous, like many people, setting up, thinking, well, is this going to work? Or actually, what if it doesn't work? And then that's enough to just put the fear into you, which then starts holding you back and everything else. So I started to think a little bit differently and think, well, what if it was successful? And then work back from that. Well, how could I make it successful? What are the things that I need to put into place? And it was a real shift in mindset, and it helped me enormously. And it also helped me to think about, although we might assume that being employed is safe and secure, we just never know what's around the corner. So perhaps it's wrong to think you've got security and stability where you are. Perhaps it's more about thinking, how can I create my own security and stability?
Great. Thank you for that. And L&D, I mean, I know there are loads of innovative ideas coming up all the time. So before we let you go, what is the latest on the L&D horizon? What should consultants be looking out for? Where can they look for support, resources, etc.? I know you've got your group, Facebook group, that gives amazing advice and resources, but are there other stuff that they can be aware of and sort of pick listening to you today?
Oh, I tell you what, Mary, I could probably talk all day on what's new and what's around the block. So one of the things that I think at the moment people aren't necessarily focusing enough on is not just workshops and programs, which feels ironic because I deliver workshops and programs. However, I also think more broadly about how can people learn at work when they need it most. So I think it's really helpful if you're looking at starting to work more in L&D. So say if you're expanding out an HR consultancy, not just to think about how can I deliver a workshop or program, but how can I help improve performance, improve engagement by helping people to learn in different ways. So thinking about different approaches, not just workshops and programs, and blend them together. Also thinking about different ways to deliver it, whether it's virtual chunks of information. So let's take a step back. If you're outside work, if you think about how you might learn to do something, there's a whole range of things. You might ask a friend, ask someone in your support network, you might go onto Google, you might YouTube it. But then suddenly we expect when people are learning something in a corporate environment, they get that learning from a course or a workshop. It's just not how learning works. But I think a lot of people are still stuck in the notion that L&D just means workshops and programs. So first of all, think about modernizing your approach, think differently. Second of all, think about how AI can help to improve your game. So I use AI a fair amount. I don't use it to deliver a finished article at all, because I think we're so far away from that point just yet. But what I use it for is to help give ideas. So I'll give you an example. If I'm running a program that would be really helpful to have a specific case study for people to work through, then I use ChatGPT to help give me a framework, some ideas. So say, for example, I'm working with a pharmaceutical company. I don't have a background in pharma. So I'll put prompts into ChatGPT to say, these are the outcomes that I want. So can you create a realistic background for a pharmaceutical company where this would happen? These are the people, these are the outcomes, these are the types of questions I want them to be considering. And then you get a scenario which will then take me maybe half an hour to tweak and adapt and add in, rather than 2 or 3 hours to do some research and pull it together from scratch.
I think you're absolutely right. AI is the old phrase of sort of, there's no point reinventing the wheel. Yeah. Sort of very realistic now, isn't it? And you are absolutely right. There's an excitement of you use AI or ChatGPT or anything like that, and with the right prompts, and you go, oh, really exciting. Then you pay close attention to it, and then you go, okay, there are some gaps here, there's some whatever there. So there's absolutely something there about spending the half an hour or so tweaking it and tailoring it to what you need, compared to, oh, okay, something comes up, okay, here we go, and then you just take it. So it's where you probably would add your value in terms of your knowledge, your experience, etc., looking at that product, even without pharma background, thinking, okay, this is how I would tweak it, or I will position it in such a way that my audience can connect to it.
Exactly. Yes. Mary, I think that was a brilliant summary, because it is about that. It's not about cheating a system. It's better helping the audience to connect to what it is. So how much better is it, rather than having a generic case study where we're tailoring something, but it doesn't cost the company who's hiring us in more money, because I'm spending so much time creating something that's entirely bespoke to them. So it feels like a win situation. It's better for the participants, better for the company, better for me.
Excellent.
Great. We're hearing a lot of good stuff about how ChatGPT and other sort of similar platforms can really just give you that starter for 10 and just get your ideas flowing, because sometimes you might sit down with a blank piece of paper and think, oh, I've got to set this out from scratch, and actually it just gives you ideas and sparks interest, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. It feels like a collaborative partner when you don't have a collaborative partner in the room.
Excellent. And they don't answer back much yet.
Not much. Yeah, exactly. I don't know about you, but I always still put please and thank you in the comments. Because I'm thinking, if they ever do develop consciousness, I want them to know I was quite polite.
Excellent. Okay, well, I mean, that's an amazing set of advice. Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's always interesting to hear different people's journeys and perspectives. It's lovely to have you as part of our community.
Oh, lovely. Thank you both for inviting me on. I really appreciate it. I think you do great work, and it's a pleasure speaking to you today.
Oh, thank you. So thank you everybody for listening, and look forward to our next session in the mini-series. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Oh, thank you both. It was so lovely speaking to you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of HR Voices. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover or would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media or email us at hrvoices@hrindependence.co.uk. Tune in next time.